Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, and today I'm hanging out with
Ryan.
Dave.
And today we have a GM 901 from Action Man, and he's got the problem of too many players.
If you have a GM 911 or a viewer suggestion, either you can email it to us at nerdarchy@gmail.com, or you can put it in the forums under our GM 911 section.
And another special thing we're going to do, based on a lot of feedback that we've been getting about GM 911s, is in the description of the videos, we're going to start just copying and pasting the email so you can see the original reference of what we had to go off of as well.
Yes.
All right, so Action Man is currently playing with a group. He has 9 players at the table. Only one of them is a veteran to the game, and that was originally playing First Edition. So he's got 8 brand new players to the game. One player who is familiar with it, but not super into it. And he has a problem getting encounters that they can be able to...
challenges the party.
Yes, it challenges...
And I have to say, like, you're doing Gygax's work by spreading the hobby, so good on you as far as that goes. 8 new players, that's pretty fantastic.
That is awesome. So I reworked the math.
Okay.
And based off of 2 monsters, an easy encounter is 4,500 XP.
Okay, so we should say that there was an encounter with, say, a Yuckle and a Drow Priestess,
and they were level. All players are level 5, so that encounter is 9,800 XP.
A medium encounter is 9,000, so 9,800 is just a touch above.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A hard encounter is 13,500, and a deadly encounter is 19,800.
So. All right.
So he could have literally done an extra set of drow there to be able to protect the priestess, and been able to be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, if he wanted to go between hard and deadly, he could even done another yokel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a really large party, and there's modifiers for numbers of monsters, but all the math is really pretty much geared towards a party of four players. Really, like, sure, the math scales up a little bit with your XP budget, but I almost feel like based on the number of players you have, maybe there should be a modifier of what scales up the XP budget a little bit, like a 0.25 or times 0.5. There is. All right.
There's a DMG section. That's actually how I came up with these numbers, because basically if you have more than 6 players, it says go to the next tier on your XP budget for a number of monsters. So we had 2, so you go up to 3. So instead of being 1.5, it's actually 2 times
should be your XP budget.
is your budget. So like Ted said, like if you wanted to make it closer to that hard, a handful of weaker monsters in there, we would definitely do that. Also, like one of the things that isn't terrible to do as well is put fodder monsters in there that are going to pop
in one shot.
In one shot, more than likely, or so that they have to expend their resources just going through them.
And the great thing is you can do with that is you can put them in waves. Things that are like, throwaway minions worth 10 or 0 XP, just to be there to soak up attacks, so that your monsters have the ability to really hit it.
So taking that sort of idea in mind too, what if you have a thing where there's sort of like a sort of strategic mechanic where they kind of have to do this thing to make the encounter easy. So like there's a gate that keeps gating in weak other demons, right? Minion level demons, Lemures, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe the key to the encounter first is doing enough damage to that gate edifice. Maybe it's like a stone arch, whatever. Maybe you have to break that. They have to expend some attacks doing that, because otherwise 2d6 of the Lemures are going to come out every single, and it just doesn't stop. And so it's not even like doing waves, it's just like, these are going to keep pouring out.
And the other thing is to not think of you think of these monsters as obstacles instead of monsters, right? Because they're weak enough to where, yes, with a lucky roll they can do some damage, but that's not their real value. Have some of them performing the defend action for your bad guys, and some of them performing the help action for your bad guys. So your bad guys, so the Drow Priestess in this case, and the demon would actually be getting advantage on their attacks, and your players would be getting disadvantage on their attacks.
Is there a defend option? Because I was looking for that. I think there's only the help option, which is providing the advantage to the attack.
I thought you could use it defensively, but I'm not entirely sure. But even still, you can use that. You could still use them in that way to help and give advantage on the attacks.
So that if you've got numbers, you don't have to worry about slogging down. Oh, now I have to attack with 30 creatures. No, you can get away with I'm going to attack with 10 or 15.
Well, and also too, all of your creatures could be performing the help action to one another. So like you're rolling just a bunch of attacks at advantage, as opposed to individual attacks. Yeah. Well, and really, you're just rolling a pool of dice too. You could just look at it that way. I'm just rolling a pool of dice, and hits are hits, and
right.
So instead of worrying, because then when you're using advantage mechanics, you have to roll sets. You have to roll sets of dice. So unless you match up your sets of dice, so you could just roll a pool of dice. Oh, that hits.
Well, that's what I mean. Like if you almost like use these monsters, they create difficult terrain for the players to move through. That draws attacks of opportunity. You know what? Even if there's not a defend action in there, you're the GM. Why not add one?
Well, and the other thing too you might want to think about is just instead of having to roll damage for these little fuckers when they do hit, just use the average damage. Like this way, like because it's almost like 4th edition minions where, all right, they deal 4 damage at a shot or whatever it is, because it saves you some dice rolling and you can just max it out. And like even if you want to give the illusion of dice rolling for your players, roll some dice behind the screen and act like you're. But like this many hits, so it's 10 hit. That's 40 points of damage.
Why is it always doing
even numbers? Why is it always even numbers? But yeah, your players might even do this. But so that might be a thing to speed things along. Action Man had mentioned the idea of not wanting to run this big hulking bogged down encounters, but I feel like to challenge the party, it's going to have to take a number of rounds, and you're going to have a number of foes to actually make them expend resources. So if you run an encounter that takes half your gaming session, like maybe only do fights that really matter, and everything is kind of building towards that. And you might have sessions where it's just like 2 or 3 combats, and that's okay because your players are actually going to enjoy being challenged more.
Here's the other thing too, like if in this example that we're using, which is kind of specific, like if they finally wade through all the Lemures and they take out the main demon and they take out the Drow Priestess, you can just narrate through the Lemures. You don't have to do that combat. Or you could say the magic that is binding them there has dissipated and they all dissolve. There's no reason to play that out unless you really want to. So you can use methods like that in your game in order to not have these big slog fests if you're not interested in doing that. But that being said, even in an encounter like that, had you added one more monster, it probably would have made a huge difference, especially if it was on par with the monsters that you already had. Because let's face it, what you really did was have 2 monsters that each had the equivalent of a full adventuring party wailing on it. Mm-hmm. When you have 9 players and 2 monsters, now you add a third monster. That breaks it up a little bit, at least.
Well, and let's also point out the fact that in the email, the way Action Man's running his game in Forgotten Realms is the players have the capacity to buy magic items. So economy, like a +1 in this edition is huge, and if everyone's kind of kitted out with magical goodies and trinkets, so like your encounters now, the book to some degree is a little bit out the window based on that, because now your encounters have to be that much harder. So maybe they should have been facing off against 4 or 5 foes that are of some level of power. 2 is just like, it's just wolf pack tactics. They're just going to it's like, you almost feel bad for the monsters at this point.
If you're bullying them.
Yeah, he mentions that they have the ability to buy magic items. They're not spending their money on disposable magic or disposable things. They're buying magic items. Now at 5th level, are they he said they're dealing elemental damage. So does that mean when they're attacking with a longsword, are they adding a d6 of some kind of...
He said he was trying to keep that low.
Right, but the fact that he mentioned it, that means they have access to something. So are there pluses that are being factored into it? Do they also have +1 armors, shields? All of these type of things drastically increase the overall power of a group, especially within the...
I have an argument as to why that is actually okay, though.
Okay.
When you have a character that can just rip out a lot of damage, especially when it's a weapon, right? Mm-hmm. he only gets so many attacks around. They can only use it so often. But as the GM, that means I can put in more bigger monsters because I know he's going to crush them. You know, that they're going to have a short lifespan in the scene. So for me as the GM, it's a little more fun. Like Bloodfang's a perfect example. That guy, he's rolling like a fireball every time he does damage. But
true.
But you know what? He's my player that goes down the most. He's my player that almost died last session, and he just rips through monsters, so I can use more of them, and it breaks that monotony of having a slogfest.
Well, that's okay. Here's the thing. Although, like, it allows you to put monsters on the table that are big old bags of hit points, right? And that you know that they're not going to be around for too long. But if they hit really hard, no one has the hit points that Bloodfang does. So that's that much more of a significant threat to everyone else at the table other than this one sort of super character. So that becomes a bit of an unbalancing factor of like, wow, if we're ever in a strategically bad positioning...
Actually, no. The Gobblos have just as many hit points, if not more. And Torg's not far behind.
Yeah, but he's also in plate mail, right?
We're the
Yeah, he has a high armor class. Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, you have concentrated his magicalness all into that single sword.
Damage dealing.
That's the damage dealing thing. He's not strapping on magical armor and a shield, so he doesn't have a 23 armor class. He's got an 18.
Yeah.
So therefore, at the 10th level that we are, an 18 is not significantly hard to hit. So you can hit him pretty easily and deal damage. Whereas if these guys are wearing armor and dealing with stuff, perhaps the adversaries that they're going up against are having a hard time hitting him.
Yeah.
Because he says that the party dealt with the drow and the yokel without really expending any resources.
Right, because it's two monsters, so that's a whole adventuring party against each.
It's true.
They're not going to expend many resources, and it goes back to economy of actions, and that's why I'm okay. So even if a monster hits hard, in that instance, and as a GM, you have to wisely choose how you do things, disperse your attacks amongst your players, and whatever makes sense in the game at that time. Bloodfang draws a lot of aggro because he's very intimidating, and he's
people
walking
want to put
around
that down first.
Yeah, he's walking around wearing the corpses of his enemies, for the most part. Yeah, and he's got this giant flaming magic sword that it just makes him a beacon on the battlefield. Until one of my spellcasters does something significant, and then the focus may shift.
Right. Could be. So that being said, to turn it back to this game is like, well, you want to have some things with maybe to get to the enemy, it's like warded, like maybe it's just an alarm spell so that the enemy has time to prepare, and maybe it's a silent alarm so like they're tipped off but the players don't know. Have maybe some skirmishing encounters to get to that drow and its minions. Have some things like blocking terrain, like maybe there's like a system of like cover that like a Stonehenge or something that's upraised, and the players have to go through difficult terrain to even get to it while they're lobbing spells, and the Drow Priestess has some things to take cover behind, so she's not taking a ton of damage from spells and effects.
Based off of that, you could also do like the multi-step encounter, something where, all right, you encounter the wizard and his cadre of followers. Well, as soon as they cross the ward, the wizard teleports back to his next area, so he's instantly safe, free from the player's wrath while he's preparing the next set of encounters. So that the longer the players take to do one thing, the more time he has set up for whatever else.
Too bad this is in 3rd edition, or he'd be like really layering spells.
Well,
yeah,
now you can only layer like 3 or 4.
Or maybe imagine the idea of a battlefield setup that it's on a ziggurat, right? And like there's threats on most of the tiers of the ziggurat, and the Drow Priestess or the wizard, whatever, is up on top and can cast spells the entire time. And there's like encounters that are happening on various levels of the ziggurat going up.
Oh, sure. Even in Ted's example, I kind of personally envisioned the fighting retreat where he's like using his bonus action to misty step 30 feet back and then moving 30 feet after he'd already just blasted the party with a lightning bolt or something.
Yeah. So it's like you could have essentially that like big bad is involved in the other fights they're having, but still pretty safe reach, and then you maximize the effect of it. So like maybe the calculus of that's off a little bit. Like maybe they're fighting 4 or 5 monsters, but then you have that drow or wizard adding these effects going on here and there.
Yeah, I think like a big thing with this kind of thing is just giving the monsters the pop. Like they really aren't really meant to be a huge threat, more of a delay, and make the other pieces of your combat more interesting.
Right. Yeah, and create things or situations where like they have to make ability checks to get to the next tier of a thing or a structure, or things that cost them significant movement to do it. And your enemies, it's advantageous terrain for them.
Also, like going with advantageous terrain, many times in games, my players will use choke points against the monsters. Well, when you have 9 players, you can then use choke points against the party because they're so large.
Yeah, maybe only 2 can fight abreast or something like that. Yeah.
So you can experiment with things like that and to make it more interesting. And again,
things that force them to cluster, hello area of effect spells. Yeah.
And then the other thing is, we've said it before, we'll say it again, XP and the challenge rating system in 5th edition is just as much art as it is science.
Indeed.
Yeah. But in this case, I think the math was off a little bit. He could have stepped it up with one more monster that was close to...
If not 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2. It depends on how strong, how many hit points.
I would have thrown some drow fighters or a drider in there. That would have certainly changed the scope of the field.
Yeah, but he also didn't want to turn it into a slogfest, so it depends. It would depend. Like, although a Drider would be an interesting addition because they have the ability to cling to the ceiling. So, a Drider archer or lending support to the demon. Really, because ideally you want that yokel in front of your party, confronting them, and maybe using the terrain, like Ryan spoke about, to make it hard to access that priestess, and then the Drider on the ceiling laying down covering fire. It would be another way to go as well to divert them.
How do you bring it down?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then also too though, like if I were running a game for such a big party, I would not worry if my fights ran 45 minutes, an hour and 15, because like it's a mass combat. Like when you have 9 players at the table to begin with, like every combat you're going to, the party itself is the mass part of the mass combat. So there's no getting around it. It's a challenge, and so like you focus your energy on just making the terrain and the effects of it like as cinematic and cool as possible, and engage them in that regard, because a fight's going to take as long as it's going to take.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I had this exact problem. Early on, at one point in time, my group was 9 players. And you guys lived through that, so I mean, you saw what it was like from the other side. Now we've trimmed it down a bit since then, but
the characters in his game may not be quite as heroic as the heroes of the town. But
I'm also thinking too, you could have a thing where like, so they have a fight that again pushes closer to what we would call a more challenging fight for the players. And you know how like video games have that you defeat the one form of the boss, now there's this other thing. Maybe it's not necessarily that they morph or anything like a Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. Sorry for spoilers over 15 years ago. but maybe it's just that like now the real power behind the thing comes out, and you do a cliffhanger to end your session for they're victorious at the one fight, and then the very next session is like them. They didn't really even have a chance to bandage up or anything because there's other fights happening just again. And between those 2 fights happening back to back, they have the same initiative for, that's going to be a stress on their resources.
That's definitely another way to go. And I mean, it speaks to what Ted had talked about earlier, is the waves. And that's just another way of doing a wave. So linking up the encounters. So hopefully, Action Man, this gives you enough info to take action in your next game. You guys, do you have any suggestions? Put them in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
Head over to nerdarchy.com and get some sweet swag.
You can also find us over on Snapchat.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.
I mean, if he wanted to go between hard and deadly, he could even done another yokel.
Yeah. So we have a really large party, and there's modifiers for numbers of monsters, but all the math is really pretty much geared towards a party of 4 players. Really, like, sure, the math scales up a little bit with your XP budget, but I almost feel like based on the number of players you have, maybe there should be a modifier of what scales up the XP budget a little. A lot of feedback that we've been getting about GM911s is in the description of the videos. We're going to start just copying and pasting the email so you can see the original reference of what we had to go off of as well.
Yes.
All right, so Action Man is currently playing with a group. He has 9 players at the table. Only one of them is a veteran to the game, and that was originally playing first edition. So he's got 8 brand new players to the game. One player who is familiar with it, but not. Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, and today I'm hanging out with
Ryan.
Dave.
And today we have a GM901 from Action Man, and he's got the problem of too many players.
If you have a GM911 or a viewer suggestion, either you can email it to us at nerdarchy@gmail.com, or you can put it in the forums under our GM911 section.
And another special thing we're going to do, based on
Super into it, and he has a problem getting encounters that they can be able to
challenges the party.
Yes, it challenges.
And I have to say, like, you're doing Gygax's work by spreading the hobby, so good on you as far as that goes. 8 new players, that's pretty fantastic.
That is awesome. So I reworked the math.
Okay.
And based off of 2 monsters, an easy encounter is 4,500 XP.
Okay, so we should say that there was an encounter with, say, a Yuckle and a Drow Priestess,
And they were level. All players are level 5, so that encounter is 9,800 XP.
A medium encounter is 9,000. So 9,800 is just a touch above.
Yeah.
A hard encounter is 13,500. And a deadly encounter is 19,800.
So, all right.
So he could have literally done an extra set of drow there to be able to protect the priestess, and been able to be just fine.
Yeah,